live free or die, and they didn't say how they die. It sounds like it sounds all glorious, like, oh, we're gonna get shot, or you're gonna, when someone's trying to take our weapons away from my cold dead hands. But no, it could be that you just die from COVID-19 because you're too stupid to stay inside.
You're listening to Unscripted with Mike and Chris, brutally honest sports talk. And now, here is Mike Jansen.
Welcome to this 525th episode of Unscripted. Yeah, can't trust myself. Simulcasting. I like that word better than video and at the same time. Simulcasting at the same time with our audio as well as our video on this and all future episodes, we think, of Unscripted, unless guys like Greg and Ryan have something to say. And Ryan, before I continue on, I saw your comment about the two ugly guys in the jerseys. All I have to comment is, I can't believe that poor, wonderful woman of yours has to wake up next to you every morning.
It's a shame.
It's a shame. And the mirror, there's a cracked mirror in that house, and you now know why. And it isn't because of Nicole. A lot of things to talk about. And as we get used to and implement new changes and implement new things and segments here on our little program, we're going to try to do this, and I'm fully on board with this. I think it's a good way. Chris suggested it, and I fully endorse it, is we're going to start each of our first episodes with a look at the things that are making news and notes. Now, if it's continuously about COVID-19, I'm not going to go ad nauseum about that, because we all know the ramifications. We all know that. And I do have to share something with you real quick, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but this will give you an idea of why I'm concerned about going to Las Vegas at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. On Friday, yesterday.
Yeah.
Friday, the state of Arizona had 4,221 new cases alone. Clark County in Las Vegas, that's the county Las Vegas is in, had 550 new cases just yesterday. The country of Canada yesterday had 321 new cases. That's why the National Hockey League is going to start on August the 1st. That is why they're going to crown a champion, because we have flattened the curve, and that's all I'm going to mention about COVID-19. But pretty amazing when you have over 4,200 cases in the state of Arizona alone, and you've got 321 in the whole country of Canada. So congratulations to the Canadians. But as we start this new segment, this first episode, we're going to take a look at the things that are making news and notes from the wonderful and wacky world of sports. And I'm going to start, and I'm just going to number them right down the list, and we'll get to as many as we can. And I'm going to start with the news and notes with DeSean Jackson, who made headlines this week, obviously with some of his anti-Semitic comments during the week. And folks, in this day and age, in the life and the times that we're living in, if you have these kind of feelings inside of you, then find a way to get rid of them, because I think that there should be ramifications for stuff like this. And I'm just trying to find there we go. I know the guy is talented, but he was punished by the Eagles this week. He has had discussions with Mr. Jeff Lurie, the owner, general manager Howie Roseman, who both happen to be of Jewish faith. And I think in this case, I believe in my heart of hearts, again, considering everything that we're going through right now and all this Black Lives Matter stuff and all this other stuff, and rightfully so, all of these statues are being taken out in front of stadiums, and mentions of guys like George Marshall off the wall of fame, the Washington Redskins, because the original owner of the Redskins obviously had some problems with racism and diversity. I get that. But then why was DeSean Jackson's punishment only a fine? Again, especially if the owner and the general manager are both of the Jewish faith. And I am of the belief, and I know again that DeSean Jackson's a very talented wide receiver, but he's made a horrific mistake here, folks. And I think at the very least, he should have been released. I think his days as playing wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles should be over, because if we have to watch basically almost every word that comes out of our mouths these days, I think when you do something like this, there should be penalties more than a fine. A fine to a National Football League player to me is nothing. It's peanuts. He's going through counseling and all this other stuff, and that's great. and he's had a talk to from everybody on the Eagles organization. But I think in this instance, in the times and the days that we're living in right now, DeSean Jackson should, in my opinion, be looking for another team.
Well, I think they were worried about setting a double standard as a franchise because if you remember, the Philadelphia Eagles used to have a white wide receiver,
Riley Cooper,
and he used the N-word, which is crazy for when you're playing in the NFL, and they didn't release him. So everyone would look back and say, well, you didn't release this guy when he did something arguably, as bad or worse, and so how can you do it now? So
different times.
Well,
I don't mean to interject. I don't mean to interject, and everybody has an opinion. But again, I think we even have to take it up a few notches in regard to sensitivity these days. And I think that this would have sent an unbelievable message, especially the Philadelphia Eagles, after what they did with Riley Cooper. And I don't agree. I think Riley Cooper should have been let go a couple of years ago. But I think this begs the question. If DeSean Jackson was a special teamer or a scrub or on the practice squad, A, we wouldn't be talking about it, and B, I think he silently would have been shown the door. But because this guy is a former Pro Bowl player, he's getting in my opinion, he's getting an extension, or he's getting a lifeline because he's a hell of a wide receiver, in my opinion.
Well, I read all the stuff he posted, and to me, and I'm not trying to be the PR agent for DeSean Jackson by any means or anything here, but I really think when I look at what he wrote and what he later highlighted, I think that he was so zeroed in on the pro-black stuff that he wasn't even thinking about all the other stuff. And so, he's not thinking, I don't think he meant to be anti-Semitic. I don't think that was ever the intent. I don't see that at all. I mean, he was just zeroed in on, he saw some pro-African-American language and some words like that, and he was just zeroed in on that and he posted it. And I'm sure that's all that happened.
And I don't disagree with you, but I look at general people, general citizens of North America. If you hear a white person use the N-word, they're automatically just pieces of crap.
That's it, yeah.
And yet if you go, and I've seen this, if you go to a particular place where maybe, and again, where a great contingent of African Americans are together, like at Rucker Park in New York, watching them play the great Rucker Park tournaments that they have in New York City, and you hear the N-word all over the place. But they don't have the ramifications or don't suffer the ramifications of using the N-word. But if a white guy uses the N-word, he just becomes public enemy number one. And I think that there's a lot in this thing by allowing DeSean Jackson to stay on the roster, regardless of what you said, and you're right. But it sends a bad message, in my point, because he's getting away with things that maybe less talented athletes aren't going to have the same. I don't know. And I think I don't blame DeSean Jackson as much as I do blame the owner and the general manager. I think they should have the cojones to get rid of this guy.
And DeSean Jackson is getting old, frankly. I don't know that they kept him around because of any sort of team need or anything like that. I have a hard, if it's one of the top guys on the team, then sure, but I don't think he is anymore. Last year he played and looked really good in week 1, and then the rest of the year he caught one pass and was out the rest of the year with injury. And I know because I had him on my fantasy team. I still won the league, so it's okay.
There you go.
But
we won't fire him.
Yeah, that was really disappointing. But look, I think a lot of minorities are so used to, they just have to really be all about espousing and advocating for their culture or group or whatever they're for, that they don't really have to factor in certain other ones potentially. I don't think a lot of black people are used to having to make sure that they're being sensitive to the Jewish community. As a white person, I know that I have to be very. I can't get away with anything, even if I wanted to. Like
No.
I can't make fun of any. I'm a white male and I'm straight. Like, I mean, I can't say anything about anyone, right? I remember Chris Rock. I'm almost out of frustration. I think years ago he tried to come up with an equivalent of the N-word for black people to use on white people.
Right.
And it was on Saturday Night Live, and I think he was hoping it would get a lot of play, and maybe if this had happened in the days of social media, maybe it would have, but this was happening in the early 90s, I think he was
Late
this
80s,
segment.
early 90s.
Yeah, something like that. And he came on there and he said, he came up with the word, do you know what word he came up with instead of the N-word? He came up with Yaku. He said, he's like, Yaku, and he wanted that to be like the black, word that black people could use to make fun of white people instead of the N-word, and he wanted that to be this horrible word that white people would just hate, and it never took off or anything, and maybe it would have today, and maybe this clip will go crazy, and I'll see this, and I'll lead to this word being horrible, but look, I just think that what people like DeSean Jackson need to learn is that it's not just about promoting, the viewpoints of black people. You also have to factor in all the other groups. It's not as simple and one-dimensional as, just say anything pro-black, and if we hurt some Jewish people along the way, big deal, that's just collateral damage. You can't think like that. If you were going to have this conversation in a mature way and in an expedited way like we are these days, then you're going to have to consider all viewpoints and have a little more awareness before you post anything on social media.
Fair enough. As we continue going through this new segment here on Unscripted, we're going through the headlines of what has been happening in the wonderful and wacky world of sports over the last 24, 48 hours, and we'll continue right along. And good news for the National Hockey League and the NHL Players Association, as those two groups ratified a new 4-year extension to their collective bargaining agreement on Friday, as well as they ratified the new restart plan for hub cities in Edmonton and Toronto. And I guess the headline in this new CBA is that the players will be allowed to participate in the 2022 and 2026 Winter Olympics. Also, the 2014 playoffs start on August 1, and the NHL is targeting, this is kind of strange, but this is, again, I think credit to Bettman and Daly they had a job to do, and damn it, they went out and got it done. The NHL is targeting December 1, 2020, for the start of next season, with the hope of playing a full 82-game schedule, even if the Stanley Cup does not get awarded until July of 2021. So more good news of the National Hockey League. They start up with these 2014 playoffs on August the 1st, and teams have already started, I think, filtering into Toronto and Edmonton, and can't wait to see what happens on August 1 with the restart of the National Hockey League.
Yeah, what a great job by all parties involved here. As we said last week, Fair, Bettman, Daly, everybody, just a great job. Give the fans what they want, give the players what they want. People are going to be in the Olympics. Fans are going to enjoy cheering for that. We're going to get a season. We're going to get a playoffs. We're going to get next season. And they've looked so far in advance. Well, you've got baseball. You've got Rob Manfred piddling around. Robbie Manfred, sorry. And you've got them they can't even see past the end of their nose. They can't even get this season started in abbreviated fashion. Never mind, it hasn't even occurred to him, I don't think, to look down the road and think, oh, hey, what about when do we start next season? When does the World Series happen next year? And maybe we make that just shifted slightly back. You don't have to get it all back on track perfectly in 1 year. Maybe it takes a couple years to get back on track, but he hasn't even thought about that. I bet that hasn't even occurred to that guy, right? Whereas you have in hockey now, it's really great. It's not over yet. It's like we haven't gotten through, and this is not Bettman's fault or Fair's fault or anything else. But again, when you start hearing about guys saying that they might not want to play, and you have more and more positive tests, not in the hubs, that would be a disaster. But before they even leave for the hubs, it's still a bit dicey, and I don't think I could bet my life that it's going to happen, but I guaranteed that Bettman would get this done months ago, and I'm sticking to it. Don't want to bet my life on it, but I'm still guaranteeing it, and they've done everything they can, but yeah, we are not quite out of the woods yet.
Next up on the list, and as Chris was talking about players in respective leagues using the opt-out clause, if you will, and there's no ramifications. What happens is you submit a note or make a message to somebody, and in all the big professional sports leagues, by a certain date saying that I cannot or will not participate. And then you are allowed to bring another player onto your roster to make up for that lost roster spot. But we have, as of this morning, have the most prominent name yet. Last week it was David Price and Felix Hernandez, formerly of the Seattle Mariners, now, of course, was going to pitch this year on a 1-year contract with the Atlanta Braves. But we now have what I feel is the most prominent name from Major League Baseball to announce yesterday, or actually early this morning, that he is opting out of the season. San Francisco Giants all-star catcher Buster Posey is skipping this season due to concerns with coronavirus and his newly adopted 2 daughters. And we also, this morning, have our first National Hockey League player to opt out, as Flames defenseman Travis Hamonic is bypassing this season because of coronavirus concerns, and his children as well. And interesting with Hamonic, because first of all, he's for the Flames, so we don't really care. But I wonder how this is going to affect his status for next year, because he's not an all-star in regard to like a Buster Posey is. But what I'm getting at here is that Hamonic's contract runs out at the end of this season, and I wonder if this decision affects his opportunities maybe next year to land on with a team. I know there's not supposed to be ramifications if you opt out, and there shouldn't be. I get that, but I throw that out there for discussion because, I think there's so many things that these guys have to think about, both personal, obviously, personal preferences and personal options, but think about some of your career moves too. These are all things that are coming into play, and I don't know if it'll affect Travis Hamonic at all. I don't even know. I mean, I don't watch enough Flames hockey, even living in Calgary, to know if this guy's any good or not. I do know that he spent the first 7 years of his career with the New York Islanders, and he was a pretty darn good defenseman with the Islanders, but I haven't heard much. He missed 20 games of the 70 games the Flames had played this year with injuries. So interesting there. A big name in baseball saying no, and our first National Hockey League guy saying no as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a headline posted on social media about how the Toronto Blue Jays are looking at, when they get everyone into the bubble, having fines of up to $750,000 if you leave the bubble, and even threatening guys with jail time.
Yep.
And then A.J. Brown, the great young receiver of the Tennessee Titans in the NFL, he posted on that and said something like, family comes first, and, you're not going to force me in here and away from my family. So we haven't even seen the beginning of what's going to happen with the NFL when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
And now we see what's going on with baseball. And baseball is so contentious already that this is another part of the problem with Robbie Manfred, is that when you have such a dysfunctional relationship with everybody, that nobody's really that excited to, shall we say, go to bat for you.
Nice.
Boom.
You wrote that yourself.
Right as I was saying it too, yeah. Nice. So anyway, but yeah, you're not going to have guys really stepping up to the plate for. Sorry, I can't. There's just too many puns. It's too much fun. Anyway, but no, you're gonna have guys like AJ Brown to say no family, and then they're not going to show up. And Travis Hamonic, I mean, he was a big time free agent signing. Everybody wanted him when he was leaving the Islanders, and then he didn't really pan out, probably because of the team he went to. Maybe he would have been amazing somewhere else, but it didn't really work out here. But it'll be interesting here. It's really going to affect the competitive balance too. I mean, if you've got money on the Flames to win the cup. And,
you're an idiot if you do.
Well, you do, yeah. You deserve what you get. It's like when people bet on
your just desserts.
Yeah, it's your just desserts, which we will be seeing in the next episode here. We're going to see lots of people get what they deserve this week on Unscripted. But no, I mean, you're going to see all these different reasons, whether it's family, whether it's they don't want to play for the team, maybe they don't like the coach anyway, maybe they don't respect the commissioner, maybe they just don't care at all and they're only in this for the money in the first place. There's a lot of issues, and this is going to expose a lot of those little fissures that we don't always see all the time, and it's going to be a lot of headlines, shall we say, going to be made from all this. But you've said all along, and you're right, I agree with you, that hockey is the only one that really looks like a strong chance of being completed, even if we have to somehow get by without Travis Hamonic.
I will. I can guarantee you. Yeah. Continuing on this 524th episode of Unscripted, a new segment that we have launched here today is taking a look at the headlines as to what's happening in the wonderful and wacky world of sports over the last 24, 48 hours. And a big one, to me, of all these headlines, the biggest one to me, the one that affects me the most, and because it's all about me, I'm just the king of selfish here. The Pac-12 conference, that's teams like USC, UCLA. We're talking now the National Communists Against Athletes here, folks. We're talking about the NC2A. two major conferences in the Power 5 conferences down in the United States. On Thursday, it was the Big Ten. That's Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State, those yahoos. And then the Pac-12 enacted this yesterday. And these two conferences, and there's more on the way. I've got a comment about the SEC Commissioner Greg, I think his name is Sansky or something like that. But I've got a message about him in a minute. But these two conferences, as of right now, are the two conferences that have decided to go only with conference-only games in the fall season. So this means that USC and this year would be, as an example, there was supposed to be early in the season a big non-conference clash between Ohio State and Oregon. That won't happen this year. Michigan was supposed to play the Washington Huskies in Seattle. That won't happen this year. Notre Dame was coming to Lambeau Field in Green Bay to play the University of Wisconsin. That won't happen this year. Just interconference play, and this will obviously include football, but it's for all the fall sports. But the one that obviously we talk about and really read about and see on television is football in the fall. But this is devastating to football fans like me, college football fans like me. We won't see Notre Dame USC this year, for example. And it's a travesty. I understand why you're trying to, make the players and administrators and coaches and everybody the least exposed, if you will, to the coronavirus. But it is a goddamn shame that we're not going to get to see, again, USC Notre Dame. We're not going to get to see Notre Dame, Wisconsin. Oregon and Ohio State would have been a hell of a game in early September out in Eugene, Oregon. So again, another falling out, if you will, from the coronavirus. I'm very thankful that we're going to be able to see the 10 conference games, but there are some memorable non-conference games that we are not going to be able to see in 2020 because, again, of COVID-19.
Yeah, well, if the U.S. had flattened the curve like Canada has, they would have had football no problem, I think, by the time fall comes around. I don't think it would have been any issue whatsoever. They had lots and lots of time to get their act together, as various states, and I think some states have done okay, so I don't want to blame everybody. But, I mean, you mentioned Arizona earlier. Yeah. And, I mean, Arizona is as good of an example as there is when it comes to, no one takes my guns and nobody tells me what to do.
Exactly right. And Arizona was one of the first to open up again, and they obviously opened up too early.
Well, but it's that whole thing, like, is it New Hampshire that's live free or die? Is that New Hampshire?
I think you're right.
I think it's New Hampshire.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
You're pretty good there.
Yeah. So, but, I mean, there's a lot, all those states, and New Hampshire isn't even the most crazy, gun state or anything like that, or it's certainly not southern state, but there's a lot of those states, that's what it is, live free or die. And they didn't say how they die. It sounds all glorious, like, oh, we're going to get shot, or you're going to, when someone's trying to take our weapons away from my cold dead hands. But no, it could be that you just die from COVID-19 because you're too stupid to stay inside. And okay, great. So I'll keep living free and you're going to die. And sorry, you needed to flatten the curve and you didn't. So
before we get out of here on this 525th episode of Unscripted, simulcast both on the video and obviously with the audio, big ticket item Saturday night from the Flash Forum. I wonder who drew that up. Was that White too? The Flash Forum, I like that. UFC 251, the first one at Flash Forum at Fight Island, I should say. I'm really having trouble with my lips today. In Abu Dhabi, features a very deep and talented fight card, headlined by Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. Give us, Mr. UFC guy, give us your quick analysis as to what you're expecting tonight from Abu Dhabi.
Well, in reality, what should happen is that Usman should destroy him, and that's not Masvidal's fault. The problem is Usman has been training for a title fight, but his opponent has COVID-19 and couldn't make it. So now Masvidal had to step in as a replacement, and it's really tough to step in as a replacement when you're in a global pandemic. You haven't been training, you didn't have any fights scheduled. You then have to, out of nowhere, you haven't even cut weight yet, never mind trained. Most of these guys go through a 3-month camp working on every aspect of fighting. Okay, work on your wrestling for a bit, work on your jiu-jitsu for a bit, work on your striking for a bit, work on your... Like, they have to go through this really intensive, multifaceted 3-month camp to even get ready for a fight. This poor guy has been sitting there with nothing to do. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he has to fly to Vegas, do all the tests for COVID-19, pass them all, fly all the way across the world to Abu Dhabi.
Oh my God.
Then, once he gets there, he then gets to start trying to frantically cut weight, which is a disaster and the most exhausting thing ever anyway. I don't even know if he'll get to train at all, really, before the fight. Now, this is Jorge Masvidal. This is as badass of a guy as there is. He is the BMF champion, what they called it, right? Of course, where he beat Diaz. And so he's, the baddest guy around. He made his name before he was even in the UFC. He was making... he was on YouTube videos when YouTube was brand new, like street fighting in Miami, basically, like literally, or backyard fighting. Like someone would have a crappy camcorder and they'd tape in someone's backyard, guys having actual fights. And like, this guy is legit and he's bad. And I like to think that if they both got to train, even though, Usman is 16-1 and Masvidal is 35-13, I have to think Masvidal would have a real shot, and he still does. Don't get me wrong. This guy is really great, and I like Masvidal. I think he's a really neat guy, and I think he's really tough, and he's a great fighter. And Usman just annoys me. He really does. And I really hope Masvidal can destroy him, but it's just not a good bet.
With those comments, we're hoping for Masvidal to win tonight.
I am definitely hoping for Masvidal to win,
good.
and so I think you would too, because he's one of those. He's just a badass, but he seems like a decent guy, and he will show respect when it's proper, but then he'll turn into a street fighter on you if you're an ass to him. Whereas Usman is, he just annoys me. Usman, I don't know, I just don't like him, and I feel like he's gotten lucky a couple times, and I just think Masvidal can absolutely beat him. But I always have to look at it from a betting point of view and a prediction point of view, and I can't predict Masvidal when he's at such a disadvantage. To fly across the world and then start your weight cut and you haven't trained, it's brutal. So, all the credit in the world for him having the balls to step up and go through all this just to probably lose. Yeah. He is getting a title shot, so you don't want to say no to those too often. But, hey, all the best to Masvidal tonight.
Real quick before we get out of here, one more that I want to touch base on, and this is kind of funny because if you remember and listened to a number of the previously produced 500 and whatever it is episodes we've done here on Unscripted, you remember I've talked a lot about Zion Williamson in regard to, I think that he was a little fat. I think he was a little out of shape, and if he didn't get his you-know-what together, I felt that Zion Williamson was going to become this generation's Charles Barkley. But I got to tell you, I've seen some pictures and some video yesterday of Zion Williamson, and he looks fantastic.
Really?
He took the time during this downtime to get his ass in shape, and folks, he looks like a monster out there. And so if you have a couple extra bucks moving forward and want to put it on a flyer, because at this point of the season, especially as we restart here, you're not going to make any money betting on the Milwaukee Bucks, the Los Angeles Lakers or Clippers, these kind of teams, because those guys are supposed to be where they are right now. But I'm telling you, if you want to throw an extra $50 or $100 on the New Orleans Pelicans, I would do it just because of what I've seen in the way that Zion Williamson has come back. Looks like a totally different guy. I bet they had to find a different uniform for him because he looks just ripped. So congratulations to him. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that I think it's eerily similar to this last headline that I want to get to. Toronto Blue Jays manager Charlie Montoya announced on Friday that young superstar Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will concentrate this season on playing first base and DHing. Now, I also made comments at the end of last season in concern of the Toronto Blue Jays that I thought Vladdy Guerrero has unbelievable bat speed. There's no question about that. Unbelievable baseball instincts, obviously because of his Hall of Fame father, has something to do with it. But my God, the kid was fat. He was fat. I don't care what anybody says. You can leave a comment on any of the 93 different avenues Chris has set up for you. But at the end of last season, Vladimir Guerrero was fat. He looked like he was waddling his ass up to the plate, and I think he's a tremendous talent. He is the cornerstone of the future for the Toronto Blue Jays. There's no question about that. But I think with this announcement that they're moving him over to first base, and he's going to concentrate on first base and designate hit this year, I think that Shapiro and that Limp Dick general manager, Ross Atkins, I think they have just said, you are going to play first base until you lose some weight, because right now you are a liability to play third base. That is my feeling. And when the manager comes out and says, your young superstar who was really good last year in his first year, I think they're giving a subtle message to Mr. Young Guerrero that you need to drop some poundage. And when you do that, at that time, possibly we'll let you go back to third base.
Well, if this is punitive, then that is pretty interesting. I would say that no matter what, number one, you should make sure that even if a guy is your DH or your first baseman, you still want to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, especially if they're your cornerstone of the future. And secondly, though, like, wouldn't you want to always put the guy where it's best for the team? I mean, yeah, you don't want him to be, really unhealthy. But I mean, if he has some extra weight on him, but he's using it to hit home runs, I mean, then at least that makes some sense. I mean, you still need a DH, you still need a first baseman. Maybe it makes sense for him to go there. Maybe he doesn't get as worn out playing in the outfield, even if he is in decent shape.
He'd never play in the outfield.
Oh, sorry.
Third base.
In the field, I meant. Sorry, as opposed to DHing, I meant. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, if he's, even if he was, in better shape, why not put him at first base, have him be a little less active than a third baseman, and then he's got that much more juice when he's at the plate? I mean, I think it makes sense to put him there. Now, even if you put him there, even if he's fine with it, you still want to make sure that his nutrition's on point and everything else. There's no reason not to. I mean, athletes these days, as we know, like even golfers these days, it's not a bunch of Craig Stadlers out there anymore, right? Like or John Daly's, like we're
blame Tiger Woods for that.
Yeah, well, but it's right. Like it never made any sense. You're a professional athlete. Doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter what it is.
What I'm thinking here is that they're going to use this 60-game season to see how he transitions to his new position. But I also think there's a subtle message here that, the fastest way for him to improve his batting average, because he's not going to hit 60, 70, 80 home runs a year. He's not going to do it. As talented as he is, he's not going to. So let's have him work on the batting average and work on his on-base percentage, because he is going to be probably in the third or fourth hole in their lineup for the next 15 years if they keep him in Toronto all this time. And I believe that he can only help his team more by being able to stretch a single into a double and a double potentially into a triple by being 50 or 60 pounds less that he's carrying around the baseball diamond. And I think ultimately they're going to look and take again to see if this 60-game season, if it's a good fit with them, literally and figuratively at first base, because they have a third baseman that they could use in Brandon Drury right now, who they got from the Yankees a couple of years ago. They could use him at third and put Guerrero at first and see how it works. But if it doesn't work, or he just wants to go back to third base or whatever it may be, but you're giving yourself some options, and I think that's what the Toronto Blue Jays, while sending a subtle message to get your fat ass in shape.
Is the National League going to be using a DH this year? Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's a good chance that they just keep that. I kind of don't think they're going to go away. I
think they'll keep the national. I think they'll keep baseball permanent with the DH everywhere.
So I mean, theoretically, you could make it so that Vladimir Guerrero never played in the field ever again. Like Correct. You could make him a DH for the next 15 years.
You could make him the next David Ortiz.
Yeah, exactly. So now again, you don't want him to be unhealthy. You don't want him to break down earlier in his career than he should.
Let's be honest. You don't want to see a 21, 22 at the most. At the most, he's 21 or 22. You just don't want him to see and all that talent break down because his body can't handle that extra poundage.
Yeah, exactly.
And, with everything that the Blue Jays are putting in regard to making him that cornerstone of the franchise. They've got to make sure he plays as many games as possible, as healthy as possible for the Blue Jays. When you're in a division with the Yankees and the Red Sox that can spend, you have every asset that you have on your roster. And this, the perfect poster boy for this is the Tampa Bay Rays. They're in that same division with those two monsters, and you've got to have every asset at 100% ability to get out there and perform, or you don't have a chance to get in a division with the Yankees and the Red Sox.
I think, though, that it's not a bad idea to just make Vlad focus on that, and then he can just focus 100% on batting and hitting. Even when he's practicing, like, you don't even have to have him in the field. Like, why not? Like, he seems to be a bit of a prodigy. Like, he has the genetics, he has the pedigree, he's got the hitting ability, he's got the slugging, he's got all of it, right? And he's so young. Like, why not? Maybe he could become the all-time home run leader someday, maybe, right?
Maybe,
so
yeah.
Why not focus on that? Make it so he's got all his energy for batting. I would consider, even if he was in shape, I would consider putting him at first base or DHing. Anyway, actually, I'd lean towards DHing. I don't really see the benefit of sticking. You can put anybody at first. Any Major League Baseball player, you can stick at first base. Pretty much.
Pretty much.
And I'm not trying to.
No, you're not trying to downgrade the position.
But I mean, really, if you have to, anyone who's made it to the Major League level, they're probably okay at first base if you've already got a DH. So I don't see the need for him to do that if he's that special of a talent. Really, just focus him on being a pure DH, and I think that's the right thing for the team.
And if he does break the all-time home run record, in my eyes, he's breaking the record of Hammer and Hank Aaron at 756 career home runs, not that pill-popping moron from the San Francisco Giants at 762. Mm-hmm. He'd be breaking Hank Aaron's record, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. We've got to run on this 525th episode of Unscripted. Again, both on the audio and the video. Simulcasting, if you will. I like that word. We've got to run, a lot of things to get to this week. But remember, folks, and I'll keep reminding you, even though we're on the video and you can leave your comments, and I hope that you do, at the YouTubes where the videos are being shown, but please subscribe to any and all of the different social avenues and all the different means that Chris has given you to listen to Unscripted, because obviously that is huge for us moving forward here on Unscripted with Mike and Chris. And remember, as I always say, on Spotify, it's follow, not subscribe.
And subscribe on YouTube as well.
Right, absolutely. I did that last night. I am a subscriber on YouTube. And for me, that's big, folks. We've got to run. A lot of things to get to, but having said all that, for the executive producer of Unscripted, Mr. Chris Fluke, I'm Mike Jansen. Until next time.